Outside Experts, which is being put on by International Spectrum. And today we have the opportunity to speak with Lee Smallwood of Node3x.com.
Hi, Charles.
Glad to have you aboard, Lee.
Good to be here. Thank you very
Where do we
much.
have you coming in from today?
In the UK, so on a very nice midsummer's morning, which is nice to kind of get ready for the weekend and all that. How's it with you? I'm sure it's quite early there with you, right?
It's quite early here. I'm coming in from New York. It's about 6:30 in the morning almost, and I don't sleep much. It's quite all right.
Yeah, okay.
So, Lee, basically, what your company does, I mean, I can be very simplistic and say something like data mining. Why don't you kind of give us a little better idea what Node 3DX does?
Okay.
Node 3X, I'm sorry, does.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, there are various pronunciations of it. Just to clarify that, basically, it's pronounced Nodex. I had a bit of woke up in the middle of the night going, oh, I know, let's just change the E to a 3 and go from there. But there is a rationale behind it, but it's all a little bit dull. But data mining is absolutely right. Not many people understand what data mining is, or the wider audience. It's fine if you're in the data analysis perspective. Some people call it data discovery, which is still, it's kind of that intermediate kind of description. I kind of see where Nodex is almost like a social media search engine, if you like. Yeah, whereas Google, they collect website posts and things like this. We actually bring together what people are talking about from Google+, Twitter, Facebook, and others. So all into one place, and then just produce a various analysis of that. So I was asked that question yesterday by someone and they said, look, can you explain it quite simply? And that's basically what it does. It just kind of saves people from having to go to various different places in order to see what people are talking about and where they're talking about it. Yeah.
Well, I know that one of the things that Node shows up with is the graphic element, the way that you're reducing the data down to something much more visible.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that part of it?
Absolutely. The main challenge is with, or one of the main challenges with social media data is that it's vast, it's volume heavy, it's unstructured in the way that everything is different. There's no kind of order to it. And what we do is we look at or try and bring in similarities between social media networks and bring in all those elements. So, for example, a post can be made either by a person or a brand, irrespective of whether that's Google+, Twitter, or Facebook. Now, but it's still a post, right? So generally there'll be an opening line, then there'll be a bit of description, there may well be a link in there. Hopefully people are starting to get the hang of using images or some form of media in there, be it SlideShare or image or video. And we bring these elements together. So we look at who the person is that's made that post, what the levels of engagement that post and therefore that person or that person's network is then putting back into that post, so the ensuing engagement, which then obviously expands the reach of that post so more people see it, and the more people that see it and engage on it, it kind of identifies whether that post is actually influential to that person's network. Does it resonate with that person's network? It's all well and good.
You mentioned specifically the graphic element.
Yeah.
And lots of people say, really important, has to be a picture, has to be pictures, has to be video.
Yeah.
you've seen a lot of the data.
Yeah.
How significant is it really?
Hugely. Um, Being visual people, right? Everyone's a visual person, you know. Um, we react more quickly to an image and say, "Oh, what's that image? Does it catch our eye?" Than we do just a body of text. It's far easier for us to, as humans, to see an image and go, "Oh, I'm drawn into it," and then read the copy, you know. So it's almost like a quick jerk, and in a long stream of posts across social media, what we have to do, say, as content creators, is to try and buy, and I say buy because it is an exchange, yeah, we have to buy some of that person's time. Now, time on the web is, expensive because there's very little of it. So we need to ensure that the images that we put out there to support the content, because ultimately we want to get people reading into the content or clicking through to the link, but why should they? And that first impact of that image is the key. What we've seen, the posts that go out on across social media, the ones without images hardly get any, if at all, anything, any form of engagement. Yeah. Now, it doesn't, obviously when we're doing reshares, let's say Google Plus, that's fine, because we can't insert an image into a reshared post. So, but generally those reshared posts that carry any form of weight do have an image anyway, and they're correctly formatted. So images or media are highly important.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
But this is actually very important stuff. A lot of our audience is kind of dipping their toe in social media. They're actually a little behind that curve in terms of the way that their companies, their branding, and their personal involvement hits it.
Hmm.
But we're
I mean,
more on the data science side of it, more aware of data structures and functions, and what you do is
yeah,
kind of in the intersection between those two things, and that's why this is very
yeah.
timely and meaningful to this audience.
So, I mean, from our perspective, I love data. I can eat it day in, day out, because it's the value is in the data, but it's understanding what the data is telling you in order to make the correct decisions. Yeah. Now, what we basically see is we analyze the content, the different content types that get posted across social media. If we look at Google Plus specifically, because it was a strategic gamble investing so much in Google Plus when we first started, 3 years ago, or when we launched the public version of NodeX 3 years ago. Hardly anybody was on there, but it was Google, so it was kind of a bit of a gamble if they were going to withdraw it or move it forward, and as they promised, they moved it forward. Now, the fact of it is with Google Plus, we get a huge insight into what audiences like surrounding any topic. Yeah, whether if someone's talking or posting about, or the community that say discussions relating to movies and TV, what do they like to see? And we know the majority of that, you can pretty much guess, is video or previews. Yeah, they want to get into it and see what it is. However, there are about 20. It's about a 75% video, 25% image sharing, and the images are generally the ones that are favoured the most are things like behind-the-scenes images, all of those kind of stuff. So understanding that, if someone was in the movie stroke TV review kind of space, then you could take on that data or that insight and say, okay, well, these are the kind of things I need to be posting out there. What type of video content? Yeah, is it the preview? Is it the director's interviews? All this kind of stuff. And irrespective of whether it's the the movie stroke TV communities, or whether it's the sports communities, or whether it's the technology communities, you can actually understand the content. Now, from a strategic perspective, from a brand or organization or whatever organization you're in, you don't now need to go into social media blind, all right? Because once you get an understanding of what audience is like, irrespective of whether that audience or a single person from the wider audience is in your network or not, you can get a full understanding of the content that people digest and like to digest, and other content that isn't, say, as exciting or as digestible for people. So it gives you a head start. Yeah. So we're kind of moving now from being data scientists to almost saying we can advise on the type of content that should be being put out there. You know, even to the point of what content should be in a video. Yeah. Or is it a meme
So
within a thing?
if I
You know?
wanted to take all this wonderful analysis that you're able to do and the deep dive into these connections, is there a non-graphic way? Is there a way to actually grab the raw data, bring it into other analytic tools, and take it to other directions based on things that our technologists already have the ability to do but don't have this particular feed or insight?
Yeah, absolutely. We've made the data obviously within constraints, because you know there are certain terms and conditions with, say, like Twitter. We can't just download a CSV file or a JSON file and give you all of that. We can give you the post IDs, you know, and then you have to fetch that yourself. But that's to do with Twitter. However, what we can do is there are export functions from within Node-X that allows you to, say, save as a GraphML file, to save as a JSON file. You know, with GraphML, you can upload to things like Gephi, which is a free downloadable desktop software for PC or Mac. You can do things also with NodeXL, which again is a plugin for Excel, Microsoft Excel, which you can start analyzing things in there with as well. So we're kind of saying, you know, this is the data. Although we pulled it in, this isn't our data. You know, this is public data. This is your data. This is everybody's data. It's freely available. You know, so we've wanted to make it as accessible as possible for people that already know or have a piece of software that already analyzes, or they're used to analyzing data with, you know.
Right, so what you've got is a very powerful toolkit with its own interface, its own functionality. There's a lot to recommend it, but you've also got this other feeds that we can bring your data around to the rest of the technology and tools that we already have.
Yeah.
What kind of people are actually using your tech right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We've got everyone from universities on computer courses through to pretty large brands. We've got agencies using Node-X on behalf of their clients to get a better understanding of who the key influencers are within any specific subject or online discussion, and who the key engagers on that content are also. You know, that's important for potential outreach perspective and relationship building, which, you know, as businesses, irrespective of size, we all need. We've got marketers, we've got advertisers using it to get a, should we say, and also copywriters looking to ascertain the type of language being used within when people write. Yeah. So from an organizational perspective, when someone creates a piece of copy or a post, that generally is made from a very subjective perspective, i.e. the corporate world. Yeah. And then you've got everyone else talking about it here. Now, the big difference is if one saying one thing one way and the wider audience are describing it a completely different way, then there's a dissonance, right? So what people are using Nodex for, one instance, is to have a look at the terminology that the wider audience are actually using, and then changing the way they write copy and changing the images and the maybe the wording embedded on an image so it aligns more with the wider audience, first of all.
So, in this land of both fee and free, which is what the internet very much is, what are you making available freely? What's paid services? How does your business model run?
Excuse me, that's a very good question. Um, we are in the land of the freemium, and have been for a very long time. And, we are also working with publicly available data. So we do have that understanding. However, there are substantial costs in running something like this on a month-by-month basis. Even from a development, let alone a hosting perspective, because you can imagine, the amount of data that we're collecting on a day-to-day. However, what we did do was, because of the help and feedback we got from the Google Plus community, and I mean the users of Google Plus, and also then the help that we've had from Google Plus teams themselves, and either from a coding perspective or data allowances and stuff like that, we decided that we'd make the Google Plus analysis for free. So everybody that signs up can get Google Plus for free, the Google Plus data for free. And we've been doing that now for 3 years. Actually today, although it's kind of a week late, we are launching our premium features, where people can, there are some premium dashboards and analysis for Google Plus. It's not necessary. One's called Virtual Mentor for those people that need a guiding hand day to day when it analyzes their own posts specifically and compares that with the wider audience, and then almost prescribes certain things that they should be doing. Which hashtags should they be using? Which times of day should they be posting? What days of the week? This kind of stuff. And it automatically then creates a series of actions for them. So that's a premium UI. In terms of other premium upgrades, people can now add Twitter data, for example, or Facebook data, or news data from 250,000 news sources, from anything from like Reuters through to Mashable. So those are all like the premium side of things. Whether they need them or not, it's entirely up to them. And if they want them, then they can just click on upgrade, and everything's sorted through PayPal. There's no time frame or anything, or fixed contract length. They can cancel straight away. It's not a problem. So what we've tried to do is create this menu, if you like. And yesterday again, I was asked a similar question, and I likened it to going out for food. Sometimes you just want to go out for a main meal, right? Other times maybe you want to have a main meal with a dessert, or a starter and a main meal, or something. But you choose what you actually want based on what you need at that time. And we've decided to do the premium options just like that for our users, because it could be they're running something on Twitter for 1 month, so therefore they need Twitter data for 1 month, so they can pay for it for 1 month, and then it will stop, no problem. And sometimes they just want to analyze with the premium UI, as in the Virtual Mentor, with Twitter data and also Google Plus data, and they can get that, or another time they may just want Facebook, so they can dip in and dip out of things that they want. Other people may well want the full data all of the time, on an ongoing period. So we're just trying to be as flexible as possible.
Very good. Now, you keep saying use that magic word "we." Is that the virtual company "we," or is there a whole team here?
There is a whole team. It started off with myself and my wife, And I come from a programming background and then moved into marketing and then analysis and all of that kind of stuff. And when Nodex was even before it was called Nodex, it started 7 years ago, and developed some basic analysis of what Nodex actually does now, but it wasn't necessarily as pretty, you know. But it was an internal tool where I could provide, consultancy based on insights that we were obtaining from social media, etc. Now, my programming is fine, but from a scale kind of perspective, things like Python language isn't very scalable, So we needed a team of developers to kind of migrate my algorithms into things like Java or Ruby and things like this as well to make them more scalable. So now we've got a team of 5 full-time developers that are working pretty much 24/7 because they're in different time zones. So we're able to keep that role going. One of the biggest challenges is time zones. We've got users from all over the world, so if I'm in bed and something happens, nothing would happen or get fixed until the morning. So we've got this overlapping team of where it's constantly being monitored. So they're busy behind the work and under the bonnet. And we've got data scientists in there. We've got mathematicians. We've got some pretty high level, and I'm very proud of that team, developers who are able to take an idea that we talk about, and it is something now that we talk about because we're constantly getting that feedback from either the Google Plus community or other social networks, and that our users from there, and we like to feed that back in, because then the tool becomes more usable. If we're providing an analysis of or how to interpret the data in a different way, then and feeding that back in, then we see that as providing a better service. So the feedback that we get kind of creates this project roadmap. So now with our team in place, we're pretty strong in order to move quite quickly and implement things.
So I'm actually hearing a lot of very different and interesting things in there. I'm hearing that you're very market focused, that as a company that mines feedback, you're actually, as the phrase goes, eating your own dog food. You're actually mining the feedback and paying attention and letting your customers drive your process.
Yeah.
On the tech side of it, what I'm hearing is that you've had to make adjustments to your technology stack as your product has expanded. Can you kind of walk us a little bit through what the original tech stack was and where it's progressed to?
Yeah, of course. I mean, a month ago we launched version 3, so what you see now is very different from version 2, which was very, very different from version 1. One of the biggest challenges we had was moving from version 1 to version 2. It was one of the biggest jumps, primarily because we were only using a few servers, and the processing power wasn't all it could have been. But again, there was no revenue coming in from there, so we had to kind of keep it as streamlined as possible. So it was a little bit slow. Things were being done in real time. We didn't have the resource available, the machines available on a capacity to be able to process things on scale in the background and then create reports. Now, moving from version 2 to version 3, we did a complete redesign. We now have 11 servers, 4 main processors, which are pretty high spec, constantly running. We're running RAID system as well. There's multiple backups, so if one drops, another one kicks in straight away without loss of data. And version 3 interfaces are now between, say, 10 and 15 times faster than version 2. Now, the only way we were able to do that was through looking at each of the processes that we were doing and really drilling down into what was causing the bottlenecks. You know, if we had 10,000 users, which we do get at any one time using Node-X at any one time, what are those bottlenecks? What's kicking in? You know, how can we streamline those processes? What is it from a caching perspective, or can we actually create like an overflow bucket and drop into that and then spill over? You know, can we don't have to say refresh the dashboard every the real-time dashboard every minute, for example? Is it satisfactory to refresh it every minute and a half? You know, those 30 seconds can make a vast deal. But we still allowed people to adjust their own settings on the refresh rate as well. All we did was kind of adjust the default settings a little bit, and then really optimize the code, and then create a more lightweight user interface. Version 2 and version 1 were very heavy resource, and now they are very lightweight, very lightweight. It's kind of the difference between, say, like, you know, wearing Wellington boots going running and wearing spikes. Basically, it's that kind of difference.
But you'd mentioned individuals and organizations using it. I know you're also working through third parties like Circle Count, for example.
Yeah.
How does that affect your load when somebody else is at least partially the front end of your technology?
Yeah, actually, that doesn't. We've made allowances. So, you know, Circle Count are the only ones that are using our API at this moment in time. And, you know, we've worked together, and, you know, me and Chris over there and Nielsen, we've talked for over the years about a lot of different things. And there's a huge overlap between what we do and what they do, you know, and that's just great. When they pull in, I mean, they've got a huge amount of users as well. So what we had to do was isolate the processes that they're calling on a day-to-day. So it doesn't actually affect what our main process does, or the resource. So it's not resource heavy for us at all.
So the evolution of your business has essentially been, you had a internal project. You were
Yeah,
able to bring that into the product world, you know, take it something that didn't require somebody to be able to know how to dive under the hood and change out the spark plugs, if you will.
yeah,
And you then started bringing in a programming team and started developing yourself forward from there.
yeah.
What are you using on the back end in terms of the database technology?
So we're using a lot of Hadoop and Solr as well for that. We still use MySQL um, to basically act as an interpreter, cache a little bit, move it forward. You know, how we pull in certain things from a structuring perspective, but from a scale side of things, mainly Hadoop and Hadoop clusters with Amazon, AWS. So. And that works pretty well. I mean, we're constantly looking at different ways of optimization. You know, Node-X was built upon social network analysis, SNA, so graphing, if you like. And we're exploring Neo4j as well, a way of which is a graphing database, and it's very cool. Ways of optimizing things. And we've employed that in certain instances, but again, in the development side of things. So basically, we've got the main cluster of our servers now are Hadoop and MapReduce. We've got Solr servers in there as well, which brings in the unstructured data and then sends that back out. We've got the development, which is a mirror image of the production site as well, where we're just constantly testing different databases, streamlining code, and seeing whether that can be implemented in from there. But the biggest thing for us was when we moved from just standalone Solr to Hadoop and MapReduce.
Yeah. What I'd like to do a little bit now is show you a little bit about the kind of database technology that we focus on at International Spectrum,
Hmm.
and get a little of your perspective as somebody who has some familiarity with MySQL, with Hadoop, which are, to most people's minds, very, very different ends of the, I'll use the word spectrum,
Yeah.
and give you a little bit of an understanding of what we actually deal with.
Okay.
It, the tech we deal with is well grounded, and to quote my friend Mike Ruane, it's mature, which is a way of saying it's old and it works,
Yeah.
and at the same time still under current development in lots of different ways. So the technology we deal with is what's called multi-value.
Yeah.
And inside the multi-value umbrella, you're dealing with technologies like Universe, Unidata, OpenInsight, QM, JBase. There's a lot of different companies with their own flavors and versions of this.
Okay.
Um, Oddly enough, there's actually one that's called D3, just like the middle of your name.
Yeah.
So a little bit about our basic approach. What we do is we deal with a hash table environment, which is designed specifically to solve big data back when big data was I've got 1K of memory on a system
Yeah.
and I've got a meg of disk.
Yeah.
The original application core, when it went from project to product, was the Department of Defense needed to track parts in the early 60s.
Hmm.
So there's a ruthless efficiency in the core,
Yeah.
a thing you don't see in a lot of those systems nowadays, which are based on I can throw more server at it. And we've found a way to make that scale, and that's where a lot of our technology comes from.
Yeah. Because I mean, generally with hash table environments, the more millions of elements that you have in there, or it used to anyway, start to just slow down dramatically. So how are you speeding that up?
So say that last piece. I got how you're speeding it again. I didn't hear the original challenge part.
Yeah. So generally, like with hash table environments, the when you have like millions of elements in there, and it's looking at updating the lookups or trying to interrogate the hash table itself, we've experienced that it used to just slow down dramatically. How have you overcome that and made it scalable?
Well, there's a couple of things. One of the reasons these databases are called multi-value is because they are NoSQL style databases,
Okay.
which means that they don't have the constraint of you must use child tables.
Yeah.
What you have as an opportunity is the ability to create nested tables inside of a main table
Hmm.
or go completely first or second or third normal form. So whatever is the most optimized for your data, you can do.
Yeah.
And that allows us to do things like, for example, treat a transaction as one record,
Mhm.
regardless of its complexity.
Okay.
Now you're in a single read environment, and that gets rid of a lot of that downswing, that tank that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because if you're reading a million records, you're doing a million reads. You're
Yeah.
not doing 50 million reads or 100 million reads. You're not tracking dependencies over and over again through child tables.
Hmm.
So that's our first advantage. The second advantage is, for example, environments like Universe, which is one of the multi-value database environments, allows for what they call part files,
Okay.
where, for example, I can take an 80 gig table and
Hmm.
I can split it up into a series of 10 gig tables, link them together so you can query them as if they were singular, but you can actually store them not only separately, but potentially even on separate machines.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm doing a project for a client right now where what we did is we just tweaked the algorithm for how the table is split up. And we said instead of splitting it based on a pure hash,
Hmm.
split it based on time. So now we can say if you're really looking at only the January records, you only have to hit that one part. You can skip the entire overarching table.
Yeah.
And because almost everything they do is time-based, now they can query 2 or 3 parts, even though they've got data. We had a lost connection there for a moment. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. You froze. It's okay. Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense, and certainly from our perspective, everything is time and date um, prioritized, right? Because with Nodex, our users basically are interested in a certain what happened today, you know, or what caused that spike in post relating to this discussion on that day at that time, you know. So that's one of the ways we were able to streamline processes. Yeah.
Right, and that is inherent in the database structure, which is the thing that's really nice here, is you're not building on top of the database and you're not building around its limitations. It's designed for wickedly fast retrieval because
Mhm.
that was the challenge that was put in front of the developers when it was a project and was inherited into it as it became a product.
Yeah.
So the opportunity that multi-value presents compared to something like MySQL or a standard SQL solution is the option to treat a data object as an object.
Yeah.
You can create an invoice that has every element a person thinks of as an invoice. One of my frustrations in dealing in most data environments is somebody says, I have this piece of paper, I have this consolidated piece of information. Can you point to where that is in your system? And in the multi-value environments, you have the option, not the requirement, but the option of creating data objects that are exactly the same as the business objects you're working with.
Yeah.
So I can point to something and say that one record is 100% of your invoice. Or I can say it's 100% of your invoice, but the customer is referenced as 2 IDs. One that says who you billed, one that says who you ship to, and that data is over in a master table. And that kind of flexibility where you've got customers who need a master table structure and you have customers that have tons of one-off data,
Mm.
you can optimize for whichever way they work. Or because we're talking about time, I need to know the invoice went to where data warehouse 17 was a year ago, not necessarily the places it's moved in between, which is the weakness of a master file structure. You're not capturing it in time frame, you're capturing reference only.
Yeah.
One of our neat advantages is that we can do either, and it's a design decision as opposed to a database constraint.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean,
So
sorry, Karen.
let's pretend for a moment that we put a multi-value database on your eval list.
Hmm.
Tell us kind of about the process you're using for deciding whether technology does or doesn't fit in the work environment that you're using right now and the technology that you're using.
Mm. Sorry, say that again. I lost you on that last bit.
In other words, how would you evaluate all this lovely stuff I'm saying to you by conversation if you actually wanted to use this technology in the back end of what you're doing today? What would it have to be able to accomplish? What would that checklist and eval process be like?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it's got to be fast. That's the first thing. It's got to be fast to store, fast to churn out. That's primarily it. Um, and we're talking here vast amounts of unstructured data where we're pulling in multiple APIs from multiple sources in order to produce something which is relevant and easy to interpret. Yeah. So let me just explain what we've done in the back end, and kind of explain why we still use a bit of MySQL from the front end um, which we're still using Python as well from a basic interpretation for some of the analysis, but not necessarily storing. It's more of a not storing for long term. But our back end now pulls together one giant table, yeah, where we're storing profile name, profile. Let's give you a top level example: profile name, profile link, profile image. When was the last time that profile was updated? As in follow account and people they're following. When was the last time they posted? When was the last time they posted related to this subject matter? What did they post? What did it contain? What engagement levels they had on that post? So it's massive, yeah, and it's keeps on growing as well. What we then do, one of our biggest challenges was to say, right, we can't, with millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of records relating to profile information, which is all publicly available, by the way, just to keep stating that. We can't constantly crawl and fetch new updates for each and every profile and post that we have stored in our database. What we can do is store when we actually collected it, if it's a new profile or not. If it's a new one, then we insert. If it's an old one, then we can update it at that point. That's fine. If that post, then this person or brand has posted again 3 months after on a similar topic, then we can say, okay, they haven't posted for 3 months. Now's the time to update that profile automatically. However, that still means that generally within large discussion topics, that there are the same people posting and engaging time and time again. So what we do now is, in the free version of Nodex, there's a manual update process for fetch engagements and fetch profile update, yeah, which then fetches, the first one fetches all of the engagements for all of the posts contained within that graph at that specific moment in time, and that can be tens of thousands of nodes, right? And then the second update is to fetch all the profile information. So they're two different things, but we store them all in one database. And this kind of sounds like you're offering from our perspective. So from an implementation perspective, what we would do from an evaluation is set up the database, look at what we would need to do, work backwards, if you like. This is our fields, create them in yours, and then pull them back in again. And then align them with how we're collecting and then store from there. So I don't think it would be too much of an issue to try and evaluate. I'm always keen to evaluate new tech, and I say this is new, but it's not. You know what I mean? But from our perspective, new, to see how, if it improves, because what we look at is how many calls per second are we able to make to APIs efficiently, and then we check how fast we're storing the pings coming back, the data coming back into there, and then how fast we can display the analysis. So it's, send out a ping, this is the keyword, I want this data, we've got the data, now let's store it. Right, now let's analyze it, and now let's visualize it. And everything's timed from that. So at each step of the way, we're able to basically say, right, okay, what was it like yesterday? We're going to just do a quick tweak now. What's it like today? Is it better or worse? If it's the same, then fine, we've hit the benchmark. If it's worse, then we roll back. That's how we're constantly tweaking. But that's working with the same infrastructure that we are. What we would do is probably run our development one with development 2, which would implement, multi-value database, and then compare them from that, and with the similar queries, and just see each of those time steps, measure the differences, and feed back in.
Very interesting. Then it sounds like at some point you and I should talk about the tech and if it's a good fit for you.
Always.
Yeah. What we deal with is specifically optimized for unstructured data. You're dealing with no requirement or constraint to have a maximum field length. You're talking about an environment in which you're allowed to store one more than right answer for the same piece of data.
Yeah.
The example I'd love to give is I have two daughters. In an SQL world, the child's name must be a child table because there's more than one right answer when I say, what's your daughter's name? In a multi-value environment, if there's 5 prices that are appropriate, you can establish 5 prices in the price field and associated criteria to determine which one's appropriate.
Mm.
You're also dealing in an environment where there's an inherent scripting and compiled language that are optimized for the database. So you can do some work close to the data, do your compressions, squeezing, algorithmic determinations, and take something that's at least partially or completely cooked that you then bring forward into your interface. And that allows you to, the Australian phrase is horses for courses,
Yeah.
to use the best technology for each phase of what you're doing, not just for each entire process.
Yeah, we definitely need to talk.
Very happy to do it, and we will do that soon. Lee, it
Pleasure.
has been an absolute pleasure to have you on,
No,
and
thank
we'll
you
be
for
putting
having me,
this up
Charles.
on the website, and we'll do an abstract of this, which will be in a future issue of the magazine,
Brilliant.
and just absolutely a thrill, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Maybe we'll
Can't wait.
post some statistics from that evaluation process once we get there. Maybe a lot
Perfect.
of people would like to see that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. It would be interesting. Definitely. And thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you, Lee.
You're welcome. See you soon.
That we're off the air, that almost off the air. I hit the stop broadcast. It's not going off the air.